Okay, I hope that you're reading on 119. I read 4 more letters today. And again, like I said, it's good for weightlifting. It's good to have those in your mind. It's good to think about that's what children are learning. Following the precepts of God, following the commandments of God, loving God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Looking at 124, and it's a simple one, 8 verses, but once again, it's reminding Israel that had not God been on your side, you would have been destroyed. Your enemies would have come at you. They would have wiped you like a dish. It would have all been over. If it hadn't been for the Lord who was on our side, how may Israel say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us, when they swallowed us up quick, when their wrath was kindled against us, when the waters were overwhelmed us, and the streams had gone over our soul, when the proud waters had gone over the soul, blessed be the Lord, for he hath not given us as prey to their teeth. I love the imagery there. He's running up this hill and says, thank you for not giving us as prey to their teeth. There's some interesting word choices that you're going to find again and again and again here in the Bible. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of a snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So again, the fellow's reminding us that Israel didn't stand on its own, that we don't stand on our own. Many of us Christians are upheld by God. We just stop and don't recognize that sometimes. Hadn't been for God, and we've seen that through the history. If it hadn't been for God, they would have gotten destroyed at the jump. I mean, the first time the Amalekites, the first time when Og came in, the first time when Shihon came in, first time they went after Jericho, and on we go. The battles of establishment, the battles all through the book of Judges for 400 years, the battle for the establishing of a kingdom that God didn't even want, but I'll work with you through it if you, the king and the people, stand with me. Okay, I'll let you have this caveat, but it must be under my authority and my authority alone. And then he wants a man after his own heart. He finds one in David and is establishing him. We see the connections between the two, and I think it's wonderful sometimes to see this. But look at 124, do the grid work on it, see it for what it says, and look at the emotives, look at the emotions. We're so guilty sometimes, like I've said, in theological terms, to just see the facts. So how do we feel? How does God feel? Are we excited? Do we realize that he did not owe us salvation? He didn't owe us to work with us, and yet he does. It's a wonderful God we have here. In 2 Samuel, we have just finished with David praying because now he's got some peace. Israel is under his reign. Even though Abner has been dead, he has brought the ark to Jerusalem. He has conquered Jerusalem and made it his city, the city of David. And now he brings in the ark and established the temple and established worships there basely and wonderfully before his God, although his wife didn't like it. And then Nathan gives a prophecy saying, you won't be able to build him a house. But he has a great, wonderful prayer is, who am I anyway? Who am I to even have this house that you've given me? Who am I? But you've spoken things. Magnify yourself in my life. Glorify yourself in my life. So we see this wonderful heart of God in David. In chapter 8, he has military victories, and he really goes after. He goes on the offensive against the enemies of Israel. He's going after everybody, basically. It came to pass that he smote the Philistines. So remember, the Philistines were over here near the Mediterranean. He smites them. Then he goes over to Moab on this side, makes them his servants. Then he measures them in the Moabs. He also goes way up north. There's some people. There's Hadazerah, the king of Zobah, and Zobah is northern Lebanon, up above Damascus. There's a whole area called Zobah, and he goes up there and subdues them. And the king there, and he goes all the way up to the river Euphrates. I didn't know till today that the river Euphrates goes from Iran all the way up and almost to Turkey. So he goes up to the river Euphrates, conquering that land. And he makes the people their subjects. He also does, he took from this king, Hadaezer, I work out these as I go sometimes. He took from him 1,000 chariots and 700 horsemen and 20,000 footmen. This is what he took from this guy. David was pretty mighty, and he hogged the horses and reserved only 100. He left them 100 to protect themselves. But he had 700 men plus all these other men, so he decimated this king, but he held him, gave him something to where he can protect himself if necessary. He goes against the Assyrians, which is over to, if you move west of there, the Syrians are there. He goes after the Syrians of Damascus. They came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, and he slew the Syrians 22,000. 22,000 men he slew who came to help. He put garrisons in Syria. He left troops there to help control Syria, and Syria would now be a part of serving David, just like this king would be. And the Lord preserved David wherever he went. He took the shields of gold from Hadadezer. I can't get that right there. Hadadezer. Wow, gotta work that out. And he also took some other things. When Toi, the king of Hamath, heard of this, that David had smitten this king, he went and made a league with David, because Toi had been an enemy of Hadadezer. So he makes a league with David, and David has even more power. And it says that he went and built garrisons in Edom, which is down to the southeast there. Toi sent his son to make a pledge with David. David also dedicated the silver and gold that they got to the Lord of Edom and Moab, and of the children of Ammon, and the Philistines, and of Amalek, and the spoils of Hadadezer of Roab. Now stop and look at the geography. Philistines are down here. The Amalekites are along the south. You've got Hadadezer and the Syrians up in the north. Then you have Ammon, Moab, and Edom. He's got all these guys under control. They all are paying tribute. And he took spoils of all these people, and he got a name when he returned from smiting the Assyrians in the Valley of Salt. He put garrisons in Edom, and all Edom he had garrisons. And the Lord preserved David wherever he went. He reigned over all Israel and executed judgment and justice. He had Joab was his captain. He had Jehoshaphat was the recorder. Zadok was the priest. A fellow named Ahimelech, who was the son of Abiathar. Remember Abiathar? Abiathar was the guy that came from Abimelech in Nob and told David that Saul had killed Abimelech and all the priests of Nob. So this is the son of him. And we meet this wonderful person named Benaniah. He's going to come back to play later. And he was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Now, these two groups, the Cherethites and the Pelethites, they were mercenaries. David would go and pick powerful men who were mercenaries and put them in his army, and even put these men close to him as rulers over the forces. So he had even mercenaries that weren't all Israeli, weren't all from Israel, but yet they were willing to bow the knee before the king and work with the king and be under David's kingship. And Benaniah, which is a really cool guy, Benaniah was over these guys. He kept these mighty men in check. Crazy stuff. So here in chapter 8, we learn about how he smote all of his enemies round about, and he put garrisons around to control them, to keep the areas down. He left them abilities to defend themselves from other nations, but he was going after settling this down and settling down the Philistines and the Amalekites to the south, Ammon, Edom, Moab, and he had men helping him out. He wasn't doing all his own, and many of these men were strong men. Yeah, we know Joab's got a problem. David will take care of Joab later. Right now, he's actually a good captain. We're going to see chapter 9 is where David wants to do kindness to Jonathan. He remembers his friend Jonathan, and Jonathan had said, lift up my house, do kindness to my house. And he asked, is there any relatives of Jonathan alive that I can do goodness for the sake of Jonathan? And he finds out there is. He calls a fellow named Ziba and asks him, and Ziba says there is a fellow. His name is Mephibosheth. He's lame at his feet. Now here he is taking a lame man into his house. Normally the lame and the blind were not allowed. They were kind of sequestered off. They weren't allowed to be, near the temple, and near the king. It was considered, bad for him, but he's going to want Mephibosheth in his court. In fact, he's going to put Mephibosheth in his house, and he's going to put Mephibosheth at his table with his mighty men for the sake of Jonathan. And let me tell you something. If you don't think you're being put at the table with Christ because of what you do, we're all Mephibosheth. But when we sit at the table with Christ, it's by grace, and that's what's happening with Mephibosheth. So David sends and brings Mephibosheth, and he's scared. He doesn't know what does the king want. He falls before the king, and the king says, "Fear not, for I will show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and restore all the lands." So here's a lame man. He does have a son. He restores the land to Mephibosheth, and now Ziba and his sons are supposed to work the land and give the bounty to Mephibosheth and his family. Now, Ziba seems like he doesn't like that. We find out later. But right now, everything's cool. And he bowed himself, and he even talks like David to David. "Well, who am I? I'm just a dead dog. I'm a flea. Why would you even care about me?" And the king said, "I have given unto thy master's son," he says this to Ziba, "all that pertains to Saul and his house. And therefore thy sons and servants shall till the land for him, and bring in the fruit, that thy master's son may eat the food thereof. But Mephibosheth, my master's son, shall eat bread always at my table." So he's going to provide for the family, but Mephibosheth has special access for bread at the king's table along with the king's son. And Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. And all that dwelled in the house of Ziba were servants under Mephibosheth. He was the king of his own house. He was like the Boaz. He called the shots. And Ziba and his sons would have to work under him. That's a lot of power given to a lame man that the world didn't want, and he lifts him up. And that's us, in a sense. That we are lame, blind, lost, wretched, and he lifts us up. And Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, and he did continually at the king's table. And he was lame in both of his feet. He lived in the city of David. We look in chapter 10 real quick. We're going to cover the Ammonites start roaring up. These people won't stay down. They're like sin. Sin always keeps roaring up. And again, these nations are treated like sin. You need to conquer sin. God doesn't take sin away. Sin is there for you to conquer, or sin will conquer you. So when the children of Amnon were there, and Hanun reigned in the stead of the father, and he goes, "I'll show kindness unto Hanun the Nazite, as his father showed kindness to me." So he sees the king of Ammon. There was a time when Amnon showed charity and kindness to David through this person's father. So, that the father died, and he wanted to go and give his condolences, and give some gifts and, show kindness to him. But the children of Amnon told unto Hanun that David's not doing this. David's not doing this to get friendship with you. He's wanting to come and spy the land, and he wants to know your military, and he wants to go along. He's just going to be a spy. Listen, if David wanted to do that, he would just do it. You're already under his thumb. If he wanted to walk in and say, "Give me that," he could do it. Excuse me. So they tell Hanun, this is Hanun. So when the messengers get there, and with their gifts and stuff, to relay the king's condolences for this dead king, he treats them very disdainfully. He cuts off half their beard, which is a tragedy, which is against the Jewish law. He cuts off their pants to the buttocks, so their buttocks and basically the front parts are showing. They can't cover themselves. It's a disgrace. And he sends them away. The king finds out how disdainfully his messengers were treated by Hanun, and he responds militarily. And again, we have to realize that even though the church is treated a certain way by the world, we need to pray for forgiveness for the world, because the king is going to come in and take it personally. Even Christ said to Saul of Tarsus, that, "Why do you persecute me?" when he was persecuting the church. He took it personal. Here, David takes it personal that his messengers are disdained and treated with disrespect. He takes it personal, and therefore he goes and moves against Amnon. And the children of Amnon raise up, and they go and try to get Syria involved and Zobah involved. They're going to raise up kings. Remember, this happened before when Moses came in, that many of these kings would rise up kings, and they'd go in and have confederations and try to rise up and work together. So Amnon tries to draw in Syria. And what happens is Joab is pretty smart here. He and his brother Abishai say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You go against the Syrians, I'll go against these guys, the Syrians, and you go against Amnon. If they get too much trouble for you, you call for me, we'll come running. If we get in trouble, we'll send out a trumpet and call for you. So they established this. So they split their forces into two forces and went to battle. And it goes here, it says, if the Syrians be too strong for me, you will help me. But if the children of Amnon are too strong for thee, I will come and help you. I love what he says here. And I know this is Joab, and I'm giving him a little bit of shade for what he did with Abner. But we're going to let good be good and bad be bad. That he goes, be of good courage, and let play the men for our people and for the cities of our God. And the Lord do that what seems good to him. We're going to do this, and the Lord's going to be in the midst of it, and he's going to do with this as he wills. So I do like Joab. I don't dislike him. You know, I'm trying not to let some of the things he says and does, and later on what happens. But in the heat, in the day, he's standing firm. And Joab, so we see Joab here. He goes against the Syrians, and his brother goes against Amnon. And then when the children of Amnon saw the Syrians fled, they fled before Abishai and entered in the city. And Joab returned from the children of Amnon and came to Jerusalem. And when the Syrians saw that they were smitten before Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezerah sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Helam. And the captain of the host came before them. And it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and passed over Jordan. And the Syrians set themselves in array and fought against him. The idea, taking that really quickly, is when this battle was gone, Amnon moved out of the way. Syria still wanted to be a little frosty. Still wanted to stay in the game. Still wanted to fight on. It's like one guy starts a bar fight, another guy gets involved, and then the first guy leaves. And the other guys just keep going. You don't have a dog in this fight. You just came to help Amnon. But now he goes in, and they're fighting. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and Israel slew that day 700 chariots of Syrians and 40,000 horsemen, and smote the captain of their host. And all the kings that were with the servants saw that they were smitten by Israel. They made peace. This wasn't even your fight. That's what's interesting about this. If you look at it and do the grid work and then back up maybe a step, you can see some facts about this. This whole thing is about Amnon shows disrespect to David through the messengers. David goes against Amnon. Amnon should have said, hey, we were wrong. Sorry. No, they double down and go get Syria involved. Then Syria gets involved. Joab and Abishai break into two forces. They push Amnon back. Syria doubles down. And David's like, I'm not having this. And he gets involved. And when they finally see how tough it is against the king of Israel, they make peace. And so the Syrians feared to help the Ammonites anymore. This last sentence is so funny. They were like, nah, I'm not helping you anymore. We went in with you. You walked away. We had to fight it out. Of course, we doubled down. But I mean, this is really funny stuff. And so you see this happening. God gave David the victory. And this, I can smile and feel good. But this is the last major victory for David. We're going to see from here on that things go hard for David because of some of the choices that he makes. And I'm going to say here that we can have victory complete and wonderful and full of joy. Just be careful, because defeat can happen at any moment when you're not watching. He's got peace all around. They've pushed all their enemies back. They even have their enemies coming to them and then still getting pushed back. But when we see from chapter 11 on, I don't think David ever recovers what he has up to this point, and it's sad. But I don't want to get into that sadness yet. I just want to see that they were like how they smacked down the Amnon. They just kind of said, nah, forget it. I'm done. It's really a funny moment. Thank you.